Check this out. Welcome back to Truck Central. I'm Mr. Justin Wheeler, and this is my 2019 Ram 1500 Limited High Mileage Edition. In the 175,000 mile video, part one at least, I mentioned that the truck had some slight vibrations. I was seeing some uneven cupping and wear on the front tires, and a lot of viewers commented that it could be any number of things. So we did a 175,000 part two video, and we got down under the truck. We looked at all the suspension components, and I think we came to the conclusion that the bearings are bad, and for some other reasons, I think that my CV shafts may also be ready to be swapped. So today we are going to install new bearings. We're going to do the front bearings on both sides as well as CV shafts. Now, we may find some more surprises when we get into it, but it has been 175,000 hard miles, and honestly, I'm pretty impressed that they've lasted this long. The vibration isn't terrible, the cupping isn't terrible, it still drives pretty smooth, but obviously it doesn't drive like new, and hopefully this will get us back to that point. Before we dig into it, I do want to say thank you to Real Truck. Real Truck is the sponsor for this video, so once this is over, head on over to realtruck.com and buy yourself something nice. All right, this is the passenger side knuckle and bearing, and it was a real chore to get out. We let it soak overnight with PB Blaster, and it took an 8-pound sledgehammer and multiple swear words to get that out. So you can see just how corroded. It's not really corroded. The aluminum knuckle and the steel bearing started to bond or adhere to each other. So that was much more difficult than I expected it to be. And the driver's side is doing the same thing. So on that one, we'll show you how we got it out. Wasn't even 15. 12. We're getting good. All right, so we got the new bearings in. Obviously, you can tell we put the rotor back on already. New CV shaft, as well as a new intermediate shaft. For whatever reason, the intermediate shaft wanted to stay with his old buddy original CV shaft, and I could not get them separated, so luckily I was able to get a new one. So we're all back together on this side. This one, both sides had their own problems, but notice there's no clicking anymore. So that's good. This side, though, was an absolute pain in the butt. The original CV shaft, much like the other one, on the other side, it did not want to come out of the front diff. In fact, this stubborn little guy is what was once the differential side of this passenger CV axle, the inner connection. It would not let go. That little C-clip inside there was just boogered all to hell and was really stretched out, and it just would not let that sleeve come off. Anyway, we got it. And now we've got the new one on. No more clicking, which is good. I haven't tightened the axle nut down yet. But we're there. We're all good. I think I'm going to go ahead and do a differential service while I'm down here and just absolutely filthy. Why not? But it was a much larger pain in the butt than I expected. I ended up taking the knuckles completely off on both sides because it It was just a pain to get to. I know you don't have to, but it was just easier for me to just take the whole knuckle off. But things to keep in mind if you're doing this, I had the driver's side rotor was seized to the hub. Both hub and bearings were seized in the knuckles. Both CV shafts were seized to their inner connection where they connect to the splines of the front differential. So everything was stuck together, just everything. Here's the inside of the passenger side rotor. This is the only spot where it hadn't started to kind of corrode and stick together. The other side was way worse. This one actually came off with just a few hits of the hammer. The other side was worse. And I don't live in a salty environment. This is completely just age and weathering. It's no salt or anything like that, so keep that in mind. Well, guys, the service to the CV shafts and the wheel bearings is finally done. You may notice I'm not wearing the same shirt that I was wearing yesterday, or the last time you saw me, and that's because I started yesterday morning, and it is damn near dark. It has been a bit of a chore. Like I mentioned earlier, things were seized like crazy. Now, what's interesting is these components are actually not in terrible shape. We did hear that clicking. I think the bearings were starting to go. There was that weird kind of dull thrum, thrum sound that I can imagine is probably one of these tripod joints on the inner CV shaft. Because now that it's all replaced, it's completely quiet. Everything sounds fantastic. So the components are in decent shape. They were starting to wear, but the way that they were seized together just made this a brutal repair job. Now, granted, I'm not a certified mechanic. I barely qualify to be a shade tree mechanic, and that's probably why I kicked my butt so bad. I don't have all the specialty tools that you might want to do this kind of job, but it can be done with mostly a hammer and some sockets and some wrenches. So the seizures were bad, but the components really aren't in terrible shape. The boots on these CV shafts are perfect. This one's a mess because I cut into it just because I wanted to see what it looked like on the inside. The fluid is kind of gross, but it's not contaminated. It was sealed. Nothing had gotten into that. It was just wear from so many miles. The bearings, same thing. They were seized, but really aren't in terrible shape. So that tells me that these front end components can easily handle 150,000 miles of typical use. They probably would have made it to 200 without much fuss, and in some cases probably even longer. I did not ever replace these components on my last half-ton truck, my 4th gen Laramie. Didn't need to. They worked fine. I drive this truck a little bit harder than I drove that last truck though, and that's probably why. While I was at it, I went ahead and serviced the front differential. The nice folks at O'Reilly's told me I needed this Redline 75W85. It's gear oil. It takes a quart. The stuff that was in it wasn't terrible. And there was some trash in this bucket before. It was a little dark, but it had a nice viscosity to it. Not quite as clean and shiny as the new stuff. I went ahead and pumped a quart into that. So now the front end should be good to go. We got the, I didn't mention the intermediate shaft. I didn't order this because I didn't plan on replacing it. It's not a common part, or at least not a common replacement part, and it's on a newer truck. So, if you feel like tackling the job, it's not too bad. Just make sure you allot enough time. The 3-hour time frame I gave myself for this project was not nearly enough and way too optimistic. So with that, let me know what you guys think. I know people have replaced these parts before. Now that I've got into this in depth, I do know that the ball joints and tie rods, sway bar links, they are all in good shape. I got real up close and personal with those as I took that knuckle on and off. Not once, but twice, because I put the damned brake dust shield on backwards. So I actually have replaced these bearings twice now because I installed them wrong and I didn't realize it until I went to go put my rotors on. which is why this is not a how-to tutorial. This is mostly just a review of the parts after 175,000 miles. So one last thank you to Real Truck. Head on over to realtruck.com. They've got all your bed rails, Nerf bars, mud flaps, floor mats, you name it, they got it. Thank you to them. They did sponsor this video. As always, leave comments down below. You know I look forward to talking to you. Thanks for watching.